Well, can you believe it's 12 months already since we had the solar panels and battery installed, and I thought it was a good time to give an update. Now, I did make a couple of videos earlier, and if you've seen those you'll know that we've got 18 395 watt panels, east-west, so 9 each side, and that gives us a maximum solar generation capacity of about 7 kilowatts. But in reality we would expect to get a peak of about 5 kilowatts just because it's east-west and not south-facing. And those panels are feeding into this 5 kilowatt Givenergy Gen 2 inverter and this 9.5 kilowatt hour Givenergy Gen 2 battery. So over the 12 months we've actually generated about 95% of the forecast, and the forecast when we had the quote was 5,000 kilowatt hours generation. So we've achieved 95% of that, which we're very pleased with because it's been such a wet, warm, dull winter with weeks going by with no real sunshine. So we've not had those sort of typical winter really cold spells where you get a lot of bright sunshine. So to achieve 95% of forecast, we're very pleased. Now we'll look at some other figures, and I'll try to briefly summarize it. It's going to be a spreadsheet free presentation, so I'll just quickly go through the numbers, talking through them, but we will look at one little chart. So I've just copied this diagram from the Givenergy dashboard on the PC. You can get these numbers from the app on your phone as well, but it's just much clearer to see it this way from the PC web page. And you can see here the solar generation, which was 4730 kilowatt hours, which I'm saying is 95% of our forecast, what you've got coming in from the grid and where it's going to, and then what's been stored in the battery and where that's going to. So this battery here is reflecting battery charging, and this battery is reflecting battery discharge. So you can see at a glance, because this is much thicker than this, that virtually nothing from the battery went to the grid, that means export, and nearly all of it went to power the home. So this is grid import, this is grid export. I hope that's making some sense. So if we look at that solar generation, where did it go to? Well, I've put figures on here you may be able to read. So 1569 kilowatt hours went directly to the home, so that meant we were using energy in the home, the sun was up and we were being powered straight off the panels. But when we weren't using it in the home, but if there was a battery wasn't fully charged, the solar would go instead to the battery. But if the battery was charged and the home wasn't using it, then an amount of solar, the excess solar, would go to the grid and we'd be paid for export. Now, just from a chart that I've got lower down here that I can read, I can tell you that the solar that was generated went 33% directly to the home, 25% to the battery, and then 42% went to grid export. Now the amount that went to the battery would then be potentially drawn off here into the home. So you can see where that went is what I'm trying to say. Anybody considering a system like this is likely to ask themselves, what difference does the battery make? Well, from this you can see that over the course of the year, 1185 kilowatt hours of energy was stored in the battery, generated by the panels, and as the sun went down, we could draw that energy off, as you can see coming up here, into the home, and it's effectively free. Now, it's not completely free, and we'll talk about that in a minute, because the battery has cost you something and you've got to recover the cost of the battery. So it's not completely free. You've paid something to get that capability. But even so, let's say for the moment that you're using that solar energy, you're storing it and using it in the home for free rather than drawing it from the grid. So from that point of view, the battery does make quite a big difference. The business case on the panels is much stronger than it is for the battery, but the battery does have a payback which is reasonable, which I'll talk about in a minute. Another question might be, what size of battery do I need? Well, looking at this, we can see that the battery has stored and cycled 2,349 kilowatt hours over the course of the year. And if I divide that by 365, it's 6.4 kilowatt hours per day. So on an average basis, because our battery is 9.5 kilowatt hours, 6.4 looks like our battery, you know, needn't be any bigger. But there's a question of, what about the peak times? Well, I can tell you that no more than probably twice during the whole of the winter did we run out of battery storage power. So I think 9.5 kilowatt hours for us is about the right size. I don't think I would want anything any bigger, because I don't think it would give us an advantage, because we don't use enough power to make it worthwhile having a bigger battery. Well, on that last clip you might have heard a noise like this. It's just me messing about with this, but I'm not going to reshoot it. Talking about the cost of the battery and recovering the cost of the battery. Well, we paid about £3,200 for this. That's without any tax, because with current incentives I don't think you'd need to pay any value-added tax. And we know how much energy we cycle through this battery, and we know that it has a warranty of 12 years. At least if you buy one now. It was 10 years when we bought this, but I think we can use 12 years. So the minimum time you'd expect that battery to last realistically is 12 years, minimum time. And if I divide those numbers through, then to recover the cost of the battery over the 12 years, we need to make a trading profit on it, if you like, an arbitrage of something like 11p per kilowatt hours on average. So if you're charging this on a cheap rate at night but exporting it in the day, you need to make 11p clear profit, if you'd like to call it profit, on that trade to be recovering the cost of this over the 12 years. But if you're charging it from panels, you're almost charging it for free, just setting aside the idea, the point about recovering the cost of the panels. But for the moment you can say that the sunshine is charging this for free, because you would have bought the panels anyway even without a battery. And then if you're exporting it at 15p per kilowatt hour, which is what we get for export, then you're clear of that 11p per kilowatt hour, and you're going to pay for the battery in simple terms in less than its lifetime, less than 12 years. Now, if you can store energy in the battery and you're offsetting, say, 30p per kilowatt hour, the daytime rate of import, well, you know, you're nearly 3 times clear of what you need to get on that trade to pay for the battery within the 12-year minimum lifetime. So let's talk about the bit that everybody wants to know, and that is, how much did we save? Well, the price of electricity is changing every 3 months at the moment here, and we made the decision to buy this system when electricity was at its highest rate. And it only makes sense in a way to give you a figure based on the rate that applied at the time we made the decision to buy it. And at that rate we've saved £1,700 over the course of 12 months. Now, if we were making that decision today and using today's rate, in other words, prices have gone down, so we would have only had saved £1,200 at today's prices. But of course prices have been up and down in that 12-month period. So you know, and we're coming into the spring, well, into the summer really, and so we're probably at nearly the cheapest we'll see this year, and that would be a saving of £1,200. Now, what difference did the battery make? Well, when we got the quote for the system, based on the tariff at the time, we were told we would probably save £1,000 in a year on the panels only. Save £1,700, so you can more or less say the batteries contributed £700. Now the ratios are probably about right, so the battery effect is about 700 over 1700. Take that as a percentage, apply it to the 1200, and probably give you an idea of what you would save at the current tariff, some idea. But all these numbers are driven very much by your usage. We're on a economy 7 tariff because that's best for us. We've looked at intelligent tariffs. We don't have an EV. All of that, trust me, for us, with what we've got, the economy 7 tariff is the best tariff. And then there's a pattern of when do you use your energy. And all of those things are very individual and personal to you. I'm just saying it's £1,700 saving for us based on those prices at the time. I think if we said there was a £700 saving due to the battery, if I deduct from that the amount we need to recover to pay for the battery, we still would have made about £430 clear benefit. So you could ask yourself, if we're only going to save £1,200 in a year, is it worth it? Because it's quite a long payback time, that's the point. But the cost of equipment has also come down. So the battery that we paid £3,200 for, you could probably buy now for about £2,600 if you shop around. So that's quite a big reduction. And also the panels, which we paid about £130 each for, you could maybe get as low as 65. So I worked out for just the battery and the panels, if we were buying them today, they might be as much as £2,000 cheaper. Now the installation isn't going to get cheaper, and several other components won't. I haven't checked the price of the inverters, but Givenergy's now brought out some further products, so I would expect the inverter to be a bit cheaper too. So all of this is coming down in price. We bought probably at exactly the wrong time, because energy prices were up, but the demand for panels and batteries was also very high. Since we got the battery, the UK has introduced something called the Demand Flexibility Scheme. And the way that works is, when we're short of energy as a nation, the national grid will run an auction and the energy retailers will quote a price to supply electricity to the grid. And that electricity is coming from grid storage that the energy operators themselves might own, but also batteries in homes like this. And so we'll get an email which says, between 5 and 6 o'clock tonight, if you can export energy to the grid, we'll pay you a premium, let's say 25p per kilowatt hour. And we've signed up to a scheme with Givenergy where they actually take control of the battery in that period. So we don't have to opt in. We've opted in globally, so to speak. And all that we know is we get an alert, and then we see the battery charging, and then within that period, let's say 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock, the battery's flat out exporting, and then all the settings get switched back to what they were, and we then get that premium payment. So that's a bonus. That scheme didn't exist when we decided to buy the battery. Now we won't get rich on it, but we might get £50, maybe £100 in a good year. But it's something, it's quite interesting to see. Now I think as they build more grid level battery storage, then the need to take the energy from homeowners or retail batteries will be less, and so the scheme might only last a few years. So I hope that's given you a fair idea of how our system's operated over the last 12 months, but I'd like to finish with a comment about renewable energy in general. So up to a few years ago, the people buying batteries and solar panels were those who were perhaps enthusiasts about green energy, carbon reduction, saving the planet and all of that. But over the last couple of years in particular, the whole position has changed, and the driving force behind a lot of this now is purely economic, because you heard me say that the cost of panels has dropped by half in the last 12 months. Now, many countries are investing very heavily in renewable energy. China, America is investing heavily. I mean, from where we sit in the UK, we'd think of America as being a very, very big oil producer and consumer. But actually, the investments in America on renewables is just as big as anywhere. And you're seeing that, of course, in Europe and Germany and countries like that. So the countries that are not investing in renewables, or perhaps can't because they don't have any sun or wind or something, those countries are going to be at quite a financial disadvantage when it comes to cost of energy and cost competitiveness. So, I think often the arguments that start in the beginning about, let's all be green, I think they get used well beyond the time that they should, where the arguments potentially have really switched to very strongly economic reasons to invest, in addition to the green reasons. And just to tag on to this perhaps, look what's happening to the cost of car batteries. At the moment, I think everybody would say that EVs cost more than, ICE cars, internal combustion engine cars. But we're not that far away from the tipping point now. I mean, I've seen reports, I mean, they were on the internet, so they might not be absolutely true yet, but it's going in this direction. I've seen reports of the cost of car batteries coming down by half in the next sort of year to 18 months. So we're almost getting, you know, getting quite close to the point where an EV and a conventional, you know, fuel car are going to cost about the same. And if you think about it, you know, EVs don't have many parts, so 5 years from now, you know, EVs could be substantially cheaper than conventional cars, and the batteries are going to last longer and all of those things, so range anxiety is going to be less. Anyway, I'll just leave it at that. I hope you found that useful. Thanks for watching.